All rise, we will obey. Please be seated.
Yes, Ms. Haba.
Your Honors, in his final trial brief, at paragraph 442 and 471, Simatović argues that he left the Krajina in August 1991 and was not involved in the events there after that. Now, first of all, the accused liability does not turn on their physical presence. But that being said, Milosevic briefly recalled Simatović to Belgrade in early August, but sent him back to Krajina at the end of August. After his return, Simatović was based at Korenica, according to Babić and other witness and documentary evidence. There, Simatović and Filipović trained recruits in the Korenica camp for 3 months from the autumn of 1991. And this is at row B50 of the evidence table. The Krajina TO commander, Radoslav Maksić, testified that he saw both accused at Korenica and in Knin while he was stationed in Krajina between October and December 1991. In fact, Maksić testified that, quote, all major activities carried out by the SAO Krajina MUP during the time period I was in Krajina were coordinated by the Serbian MUP. I saw 2 Serbian DB officials in the Krajina during my time there, namely Jovica Stanišić and Frankie Simatović. This is row B51 of the evidence table. Notably, from Korenica, Simatović deployed the unit in operations to remove non-Serbs. He deployed them in the September attack on Lovinac, which I've already discussed, and in attacks in the Saborsko area. And this is at row B54. Both of these deployments took place during the period that Stanišić agrees that he was in command of the nascent unit, after he had taken command of the men that Simatović selected. Simatović himself admitted the continuing involvement of the Serbian DB in the latter Krajina operations at the Kostić Center award ceremony. He stated, quote, the unit provided important support in the liberation of all areas of the Republic of Serbian Krajina. Around 5,000 soldiers were engaged in these battles, and their actions were coordinated by the unit command and an intelligence team from the second administration. This is row B55 of the evidence table. Simatović's admission here is corroborated by other evidence confirming that the Serbian DB supported the continuing Krajina operations from their camp in Korenica, where unit member and second administration official Filipović managed the DB's intelligence and coordination role, along with other veteran unit members. And this is at row B55. In light of the strong corroboration across all witnesses, the Chamber can have no reasonable doubt of Stanišić and Simatović's involvement in and influence over the events in Krajina and over Martić and the Krajina police in particular. And I refer your honors to row B56. Your Honors, I will now continue my submissions with SBWS. I'll first address defense arguments and demonstrate that the accused's key Serbian DB assets in the SBWS, Rade Kostić and Ilija Kojić, were acting at the accused behest there. And then I will turn to argue that the Serbian MUP, through Baja and the accused, played a dominant role in the events and crimes in SBWS. Turning first to Kostić and Kojić. As we set out extensively in our brief, the accused made many of their JCE contributions through these two operatives in SBWS. And rightly nervous about the extensive evidence showing how the accused used Kostić and Kojić to advance the common purpose, Stanišić has challenged both their links to the accused and the significance of their actions, but both arguments fail. Stanišić accepts that Kostić was a Serbian DB operative. This is paragraph 286 of his brief. Indeed, Kostić was an extremely useful asset for the accused, and he played many roles. He was a key player in the accused arming efforts, accompanying Simatović to Krajina to deliver arms to Martić for the Krajina Serbs from 1990, then continuing to be critical in the arming scheme in SBWS from April 1991, and arming Zvornik Serbs starting in the second half of 1991. Kostić was also very close to the unit. He oversaw the creation of a special police unit in the Beli Manastir Sup, which participated alongside the unit members based at Tikvish to expel and commit crimes against non-Serbs in Baranja. He was the namesake of the unit's Rade Kostić Center, a considerable honor. Kostić, with Kojić, was a driving force behind the initial establishment of the SBWS police. And this evidence can all be found at row C1. Contrary to Stanisić's claims, Kostić acted on Stanisić's instructions in SBWS. When Kostić went to SBWS in mid-1991, he informed local Serbs that he was there to, quote, execute, unquote, the Serbian DB's idea. Stanišić personally signed an official decision assigning Kostić to new tasks in June 1991, demonstrating Stanisić's involvement in determining Kostić's tasks. Stanisić's own witness, Krsmanović, confirmed that Stanišić had and exercised authority over Kostić in the same way as he had vis-a any member of the service. And this evidence can be found at C2 of the evidence table. Turning to Ilija Kojić, like Kostić, he was an extremely useful asset for the accused in SBWS and then the RSK. He played a critical role in the accused's arming efforts. He coordinated the transfer and distribution of weapons in SBWS from mid-1990. He was a driving force behind the initial establishment of the SBWS police, and he led the initial takeovers and expulsions in August 1991 as the first TO commander in SBWS. Stanišić challenges Kojić's authority and affiliation with the Serbian DB, but his challenges are not persuasive. The evidence in this case demonstrates that Kojić began acting under the Serbian DB as an associate as early as mid-1990. This is at paragraph 96 in our brief. Beginning in July 1991, Kojić simultaneously occupied high-level positions in SBWS while continuing to serve as Stanisić's associate. In July 1991, Kojić became the SBWS TO commander, while continuing to operate under the accused. In September 1991, he was appointed Minister of Defense of SAO SBWS, and Hadzic considered Kojić's appointment, quote, necessary to establish the necessary links between the SBWS government and Belgrade. After the RSK's formation, Kostić, like Kojić and Kostić alike, were appointed to be Martić's assistant ministers of interior. Stanišić stood behind this appointment. As assistant ministers, Kostić and Kojić exercised immense influence, conferring on Stanišić far-reaching authority in the RSK. The RSK police chief inspector and defense witness, Petar Đukić, whose superior was Kojić, testified that, quote, Kojić was nominally, legally, and judging by his actual authority, the main man in charge of Slavonia and Baranja, even not just in terms of police. He was the individual with the greatest authority in the area. This evidence is at row C4 of the evidence table. At paragraph 568 of his brief, Stanišić asserts that Kojić's personnel file suggests that he was employed by the public, not the State Security Service, from November 1991 through December 2001. This is inaccurate. Kojić's personnel file shows that on 19 March 1993, Stanišić appointed him as a DB operative in Simatović's second administration. This is P569, pages 14 to 15. Now, Kojić's personnel file does assign him to the Belgrade SUP Public Security in November 1991. But Kojić himself was clear in a statement to the RS authorities in 2008 that he was only ever nominally working for public security and was actually working for the Serbian DB, subordinated to Jovica Stanišić as an operative from, quote, the beginning of the war, or rather after the end of military operations in Vukovar. And this is P481, page 3. Stanisić's assertion at paragraph 566 of his brief that this statement was self-serving cites no evidence and is left unexplained. It is not clear how claiming a wartime connection to the accused, who at that time was already on trial in The Hague for war crimes and crimes against humanity, could have been a self-serving move for Kojić. Kojić's subordination to the accused is corroborated by numerous contemporaneous documents, which your honors can find at C5 of the evidence table. Witnesses who interacted with Kostić and Kojić also observed that they were operating under the accused. This is at C6 of the evidence table. At paragraph 570 of his brief, Stanišić argues that Aco Drača and Nebojša Bogunović, purportedly two well-placed witnesses to Kojić's actions and subordination, did not know anything about his association with the Serbian DB. Drača's evidence that Kojić denied to him that he was a Serbian DB employee is no surprise, considering that Drača himself was a Serbian DB associate, whom the accused used to control the Krajina DB, both during the time of the SAO Krajina and the RSK. And I refer your honors to paragraph 332 of the prosecution's brief and Annex A. Bogunović simply had limited knowledge of the identities of Serbian DB operatives. And I refer your honors to row C8. Stanisić's arguments on Kojić's and Kostić's involvement in crime, or not, are internally inconsistent. In a section entitled Kostić and Kojić Trying to Maintain Order in a Lawless Land, Stanišić notes that they were absent from important meetings, paragraph 713 of his brief, but that they had a law enforcement role, but that Kostić was implicated in looting from abandoned homes, that's paragraph 725, but that numerous exhibits demonstrate them acting lawfully as police officers, that's paragraph 726. Stanišić concludes this section at paragraph 727 by highlighting a September 1994 document showing the RSK authorities attempting to remove Kostić and Kojić, who were backed by, quote, Belgrade, and thus, in Stanisić's submission, not likely working closely with Martic. Of course, this would certainly be consistent with the other evidence that they were acting in SBWS at the behest of the accused and not the RSK authorities. Martic noted that he suspected Kostić of crimes, and in fact, the evidence shows that Stanišić intervened in September 1994 to obstruct the attempt to remove Kostić from his position of Assistant Minister of Interior in SBWS. Stanišić considered that the Serbian DB had invested too much in the Krajina MUP and advocated with Milosevic to ensure that it would not be relinquished to somebody else. This is paragraph 99 of our brief and row C8 of the evidence table. I'd now like to say a few words about Badja. Both accused have detailed Badja's role leading operations as SAO, SBWS TO commander, commanding police and TO units, and highlighted his dominant role in SBWS after his arrival in autumn 1991. Stanišić has Badja alongside Arkan and the JNA in a triumvirate of power in the area. Both Stanišić and Simatović have provided detailed submissions on Badja's close relationship with Arkan and responsibility for Arkan's and the SDG's activities in SBWS. And all of this is at row C9 of the evidence table. Evidence of Badja in this role is entirely consistent with the prosecution case. Badja is a charged JCE member, and not just any JCE member, but one positioned very close to the accused in the Serbian MUP with close ties to Milosevic. If he were alive, he would probably be a co-accused in this case. The SBWS triumvirate of Arkan, Badja, and the JNA, as Stanišić describes it, along with Bogdanovic's patronage for Arkan, encapsulates the close cooperation of JCE members using their forces and resources to further the common purpose. Simatovic's arguments detailing Arkan's close connections and cooperation with Bogdanovic, Badja, JNA generals, and Murgud, for example in paragraph 953 of their brief. This paints a similar picture. The accused attempts to cut themselves out of this well-functioning collaboration to further the common purpose are not consistent with the evidence. Badja's central role in furthering the common plan on the ground in SBWS complements the accused's role and responsibility for the crimes. As Mr. Stringer has already discussed, Badja was working with Stanišić, Simatović, and Milosevic along the Vojna linija performing a military role as SBWS TO commander, while officially under the Serbian MUP. This at a time when, as I've already said, Stanišić was the dominant person in the Serbian MUP, and first and foremost in the Vojna linija. As set out in paragraph 395 of our brief, Stanišić coordinated the Serbian MUP members behind the scenes from Belgrade, while Baja was the man on the ground in SBWS, just as Simatović was the man on the ground in Krajina for much of this period. Consistent with this division of responsibility, the SBWS Minister of Interior, Bogunović, observed that Stanišić was the link between Milosevic in Belgrade and Baja and Arkan in SBWS. And this is at row C10 of the evidence table. The Western Srem expulsion campaign offers a salient example of the cooperation among the accused, Baja, and the JNA. Stanišić met with Baja and with General Aranđelović, the JNA commander, overseeing that expulsion campaign. As we set out in our brief, at paragraphs 280 and 417 to 418, Stanišić and Simatović established the unit at their Lezhimir base, just across the border from Western Srem, in September 1991, just weeks after Baja arrived in Eastern Slavonia, and as the expulsion campaign in Western Srem was already underway. I refer your honors to paragraph 755 to 761 of our brief for the Western Srem expulsions. Witness testimony and contemporaneous records from the Serbian DB files show that the unit deployed into operations and helped capture Bapska and Sharongrad, securing Pajzoš, while the accused promptly established the unit's forward command post there. See paragraph 419 of our brief. These operations removed a huge percentage of non-Serbs from Western Srem. Stanišić agrees that he was in charge of the unit, or the nascent unit as he calls it, during their deployment for the Western Srem operations. For his part, Baja promptly established Serb police stations in the newly emptied Western Srem, including Ilok, where he appointed a commander from the Serbian MUP and brought 60 police officers from Belgrade to man the station. Stanišić was present in Belgrade for these Serbian MUP officers' pre-deployment meeting, as we state in paragraph 404 of our brief. Instead of preventing crimes, the police enhanced the climate of impunity and themselves participated in the arrests, interrogations, and evictions of non-Serbs. Stanišić and Simatović were as much a part of the JCE the defense have described as Baja. This is at row C11 of the evidence table. Simatović argues that Baja was not affiliated with the Serbian MUP while he was in SBWS in 1991. This is not credible. Baja left Belgrade with groups from the Serbian MUP's PSI and PJM units. They were armed with their Serbian MUP-issued weapons. They drove their Serbian MUP-issued vehicles. Over the course of 1991, fresh Serbian MUP units arrived, and they continued to be paid by the Serbian MUP. All this despite the fact that the Serbian MUP was, according to defense witnesses, short-staffed and under-resourced, both for the border police and for police units to deal with problems in Kosovo. Then when Baja returned to the Serbian MUP at the end of the year, he was promoted to head of public security, Stanisić's counterpart, but on the public security side. It is simply not possible in these circumstances that Baja's stint in the SBWS field was independent of the Serbian MUP. And for all of this, I refer your honors to C12 of the evidence table. As Alexander Vasilyevich said of Baja's time in SBWS, quote, whether he was in the official capacity of belonging to the MUP or not, whether a technical solution was found, I think that is by the way. What is important is that a person was taken, a high official of the MUP was taken and given the task of doing something that was not the MUP's job. And after that, he was to be appointed to a top echelon post in the MUP of Serbia. Your Honors, I would now like to move on to the Bosnia component of our case. At the outset, I would like to address some very serious and, in our submission, unfounded challenges to the evidence of a witness whose testimony is central to our case. And for this, I will need to go into private session.
Private session?
I will now address you on the events in the
Now an open
municipality.
session, Your Honor.
My apologies. I will now address you on the events in the municipalities in Bosnia in 1992, beginning with Bijeljina and Zvornik in eastern Bosnia, and then moving along the Posavina corridor to Bosanski Shamac and Doboj. I'll begin with Bijeljina and Zvornik. On the night of the 31st of March to the 1st of April, 1992, Arkan led a combination of Serb forces in a swift and brutal attack on Bijeljina. Encountering no resistance, Arkan and the Serb forces secured Bijeljina within hours. Arkan and the SDG then moved on to Zvornik. His arrival there had been approved by the Serbian MUP and Serbian DB, and it had been arranged by the accused operative, Rade Kostic, and JCE member and RS presidency member, Biljana Plavsic. They had arranged this with the new SDS-appointed Serb police chief in Zvornik. Less than 24 hours after Arkan's order to commence the attack, Serb forces had taken the town. Following the takeover, the paramilitaries were consolidated under TO commander Marko Pavlović, a Serbian DB associate who had been brought to Zvornik by Kostic. He presided over the cleansing of the Bosnian Muslim villages in Zvornik. As just one example, in Kozlik, he gave the residents 1 hour to leave or be killed, as described in paragraph 816 of our brief. The accused raise a number of arguments to distance themselves from the crimes and perpetrators in Bijeljina and Zvornik. They argue that they had nothing to do with either Arkan's and the SDG's deployment there, or Rade Kostic's involvement there, or Marko Pavlović. I will explain why these arguments fail and conclude by debunking Stanisić's argument that his arrest of the Yellow Wasp leaders at the end of 1993 absolves him of responsibility for their crimes. First, both accused argue that they have no responsibility for Arkan's and the SDG's involvement in Bijeljina and Zvornik. They impugn the evidence of multiple witnesses who confirmed that they were very much behind Arkan's presence in these locations. And I will need to go into private session again in order to address these details.
Private session.
RFJ 37
in open session, Your Honors.
Prior to Archon's arrival, the Serbian DB had been sending weapons to Zvornik since 1991, facilitated by JCE member Bogdanović, Kostić, and fellow Serbian DB associate Marko Pavlović. Stanišić asserts, beginning in paragraph 1282 of his brief, that Kostić was not answerable to him when he was bringing Pavlović and weapons, as well as Archon and the SDG, to Zvornik. Though Stanišić agrees that Kostić was a Serbian DB operative, he asserts in paragraph 1285 that Kostić, quote, may have been acting from his position within the RSK MUP. In light of the extensive evidence of Kostić working directly for the accused to arm Serbs in Krajina and SPWS, there is no reasonable possibility that Kostić's arming activities in Zvornik were just yet another frolic. And I refer your honors to row C16 of the evidence table. Could we move again to private session, your honors?
Private session.
back in open session, Your Honors.
Your Honors, Stanišić suggests at paragraph 1319 to paragraph 1321 of his brief that the fact that he ordered the Vučković brothers, the leaders of the Yellow Wasp paramilitary group, arrested in November 1993, raises doubt that he, Stanišić, was involved in the Zvornik crimes. Your Honors will recall that the Yellow Wasps was one of the paramilitary groups operating under Pavlovich, which committed terrible crimes against Bosnian Muslims, cutting off prisoners' body parts and forcing family members to perform sexual acts on each other. Some were executed, and many women were raped. That Stanišić exercised his authority to personally order the Yellow Wasp's arrest actually raises the question, if he had this power and the Serbian DB intelligence, why did he not do it sooner? One of Stanisić's witnesses explained the Yellow Wasps were not politically connected, which gave the Serbian DB the opportunity to get media coverage for purporting to do something about war crimes. The arrest did not occur until more than a year and a half after the crimes, at a time when reports about the crimes in Bosnia were being published widely. In other words, when it was politically expedient. Perhaps a more telling question is why the Vučković brothers were the only two arrests at that time. In their statements to the DB, both brothers provided information about the heinous crimes perpetrated by Marko Pejic, Arkon's deputy at the time. Pejic and the other SDG members took Bosnian Muslim prisoners detained at the Alhos factory in Karakai to a gravel pit and forced them to perform oral sex on each other before shooting them. Already by July 1992, the DB had extensive information about the SDG's crimes, with one report noting the DB has for some time now had data on the genocide committed in the Zvornik region by the SDG volunteers. Stanišić had the authority to order the arrest of even powerful individuals. Not only did Stanišić decline to use this authority to arrest Pejic on the basis of the information the Vučković brothers provided in the context of their own arrest, the Serbian DB then issued per diem payments to Pejic as a member of the SDG for the period leading up to the Sanski Most operations in 1995. There is no reasonable inference other than that the accused shared the intent for the crimes committed by these Serbian DB-linked paramilitary groups in Bijeljina and Zvornik. And I refer your honors to C18 of the evidence table. I'll now briefly address Bosanski Shamac and Doughboy. The accused collaborated with Bosanski Shamac's SDS leadership to train Bosanski Shamac's locals alongside unit members at the Paisos training camp in March 1992, before deploying them to take over Bosanski Shamac. As Stanišić points out in his brief at paragraphs 801, 802, and 1017, Simatović was directly involved in this training and deployment. Stanišić also concedes at paragraph 1018 that before this training, he personally vetted unit member Dragan Đorđević, Crni. Contrary to the Stanisić's nascent unit theory, however, the unit did not disband immediately thereafter. Rather, as described in our brief, the evidence shows that following Simatović's briefing on 11 April 1992, unit members and Paisos-trained Red Berets from Bosanski Shamac were placed under Crni's command. From there, they deployed into Bosanski Shamac. Could we have the slide, please? This unit and the unit at Doughboy had a gray wolf insignia, and they were also known as the Gray Wolves because of their patches, an example of which you'll see on the screen. Could we have the next slide, please? Simatović wore a camouflage uniform with the same wolf insignia, as you can see in the photograph. In addition to Simatović personally deploying the unit, other evidence demonstrates the accused's authority over the unit and its continuity during the Bosanski-Shamats operation. Besides Czerny, another member of this group was Alexander Vuković, who joined the unit in February 1992 in Lezhimir and was honored posthumously at the unit's anniversary ceremony at the Rady Kostić Center on 4 May 1996. Witness Todorović confirmed that both Czerny and Vuković were members of the Serbian DB Special Unit and instructors at Pajzoš. His evidence is corroborated by a Mladić notebook entry dated 7 December 1992, recording that at a meeting between Mladić and the Shamats leadership, Todorović named Czerny and Vuković as two of the Serbian MUP members among a group of men who had been in the Ilok area for training before transferring on helicopters, presumably to the Shamats area. Contrary to the accused's claims that Bosanski-Shamats was simply a legitimate military target, the unit members and Pajzoš-trained Red Berets under Czerny joined other Serb forces in terrorizing and removing non-Serb civilians, and the unit members distinguished themselves by their brutality. Stanišić even acknowledges at paragraph 1024 of his brief that the post-takeover operations in Bosanski-Shamats undoubtedly included ethnic cleansing to achieve the Bosnian Serb strategic goals. And I refer your honors to row C22 of the another unit member in Bosanski-Shamats was a member of the unit. As Simatović points out, Lugar was not only a member of the DB Special Unit, he was also later processed by the Serbian DB. Lugar's relationship with the Serbian DB is best illustrated by P847, memorializing his meeting with the DB operative in July 1993, wherein Lugar confirmed that he was paid by the Serbian MUP while deployed in Bosanski-Shamats. During the meeting, the operative noted, quote, Milković was told that we know what he did for the Serbian people, especially in the area of Bosanski-Shamats. However, Milković was seriously warned to remove violence, talk about wartime events, and any mention of the department from his future conduct, because otherwise he would bring his life into danger. This none too subtle threat speaks volumes about the Serbian DB's desire to conceal its relationship with Lugar. As Stanisić's witness, Ljubomir Ristić, confirmed, the DB's third administration was only monitoring Lugar to ensure that he did not cause problems in Serbia. The DB did not wish for persons like Lugar to provide the services that they had provided in Bosnia, in Serbia itself. The accused's continued engagement with Cerny further underscores their authority over him and their countenance of his crimes. When Cerny was arrested, he insisted that Simatović be informed, and Stanišić secured his release, warning that Cerny's arrest was really touching a hornet's nest. As Cerny himself explained, local Serb authorities and the VRS later asked him to return through Serbian DB officials. Stanišić personally discussed with the VRS whether Cerny would be allowed to continue operating in the Bosanski Shamac area, and Simatović then redeployed this unit, including Cerny, Lugar, and Debeli, to Bosanski Shamac. And this is all at row C24 of the evidence. The accused employed the same strategy from Bosanski Shamac in Doboj in April 1992. Owing to the accused's close ties to the RS MUP, the unit in Doboj, under Božović, operated under the auspices of the Security Services Center, or CSB Doboj. In order to legitimize their presence in the area, Božović and the unit members who participated in Doboj were paid through the CSB Doboj as a special group. While this is evidence of coordination between the accused and the RS MUP, the group nevertheless remained under Božović and was subordinate to the accused.
Ms. Harper, it's the time.
I see that it is the time.
So we return in 30 minutes.
All rise, we will away.